The first time I saw the sign, I froze. For sale by owner in big red letters. Staked right into my front yard like a cruel joke. My stomach dropped. Was this some kind of sick prank? I rushed forward, yanking the wooden post out of the ground. Dirt spraying across my sneakers. My hands were shaking. The ink on the sign was still glossy, almost brand new. Who would do this? And then I heard it. That laugh. That smug, clipped laugh I'd come to dread. Karen. She was standing across the street in her sun hat and floral blouse, clutching her tiny dog like it was some sort of royal accessory. "Oh, didn't you know?" she called out, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "I thought you were finally moving out. Thought I'd help you advertise." My blood boiled. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted back. "This is harassment, Karen." She just shrugged, tilting her head with that fake smile. "Maybe if you kept your yard HOA compliant, you wouldn't be embarrassed enough for people to think you're selling." I swear, in that moment, I could hear my pulse in my ears. Thump, thump, thump. I wanted to scream, to tear into her with every ounce of anger I had bottled up from months of her nonsense. But I took a deep breath instead, gripping the sign so hard the edges dug into my palm. Because I knew this wasn't just some petty prank. This was a war she wanted, and I wasn't going to let her win. It wasn't the first time Karen had tried to humiliate me. Oh no, she had a whole repertoire. She'd left anonymous notes about my non-regulation flower beds. She called the Homeowners Association board when my kids chalked the sidewalk. She even once accused me of running an illegal daycare, just because I had my niece and nephew over during spring break. But this fake for sale stunt, was new territory. It wasn't just mean. It was defamatory. People walking their dogs slowed down to stare. Cars passing by actually slowed at the curb. Some even snapping pictures. My neighbor from down the block shouted, "Hey, moving out. How much you asking?" I wanted to sink into the earth. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in the kitchen with my head in my hands. The silence was deafening. My wife squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "Don't let her break you. She wants a reaction." "But it's working," I muttered. "What if people think we actually lost the house? What if our kids hear rumors at school?" I slammed my fist softly on the table, letting out a long sigh. She's crossing the line. And that's when my wife said the words that shifted everything. Then make her pay for it. Legally. The next morning, I took pictures. Every angle of that sign. The dirt it was planted in. Even Karen smirking across the street like the devil herself. I went door to door asking if anyone else had seen her putting them up. Most neighbors were hesitant. Who wants to get on Karen's bad side? But one older gentleman, Mr. Delgado, nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, voice gravelly. "Saw her around dawn with a hammer and those signs in her trunk. Thought it was odd. Figured it was another one of her crusades." Bingo. Witness. By the weekend, I had a folder full of evidence, photos, a witness statement, and even a short video from a neighbor's Ring camera showing Karen's silhouette hammering in the post. The sound of her mallet, thunk, 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 was the final nail in her coffin. I filed a harassment and defamation complaint. And oh, did the court date come fast. The day of the hearing, Karen waltzed in like she owned the courthouse. Big sunglasses, designer purse, that same smug little dog. She barely glanced at me as she sat down, legs crossed, smirk plastered on her face. I'll admit it, my palms were sweaty. My throat was tight. I kept going over my evidence in my head. Please don't let me stumble. Please don't let her twist this. The judge entered and silence fell. Case number 427B. He announced. Plaintiff versus Karen Hollingsworth. Allegations of harassment, defamation, and homeowners association misconduct. Karen's attorney started first, painting her as some kind of misunderstood neighborhood watch angel. My client merely observed unsightly yard conditions and jokingly suggested the property looked as though it were for sale. A joke, I muttered under my breath, my fists clenched. Then it was my turn. I stood, voice trembling at first but gaining strength. I showed the photos. I presented the video. I read Mr. Delgado's signed statement. And when I told the judge about how my kids had cried, asking if we were moving away, my voice cracked. I didn't even try to hide it. Karen snickered loudly, whispering something to her lawyer. That was her mistake. The judge's eyes snapped to her. Ms. Hollingsworth, do you find this amusing? She straightened in her chair. Well, Your Honor, with respect, I just think this whole thing is being blown out of proportion. I mean, it's just a sign. Just a sign. The judge thundered, slamming his gavel so hard the room echoed. Do you understand the seriousness of defamation? Of targeted harassment? This is not a playground for your homeowners association power games. Ma'am. Karen's face drained of color. The smirk was gone. And then came the twist. The judge asked about prior incidents. Apparently, my complaint wasn't the first one. Other neighbors had quietly filed against Karen before. Noise complaints, false reports, even stalking allegations. The courthouse clerk read them out like a grocery list, and each one made Karen sink lower in her seat. My jaw dropped. I hadn't known about all that. She wasn't just a nuisance to me. She was a serial tormentor. The judge leaned back, eyes blazing. Ms. Hollingsworth, this pattern of behavior is unacceptable. You have wasted this community's peace and this court's time. He turned to me. Sir, you and your family deserve restitution. Then, bam, the hammer dropped. Karen was fined thousands of dollars in damages, ordered to pay all court costs, and slapped with a restraining order forbidding her from contacting me or my family. The judge's words rang like a bell. You abuse power. You pay the price. The courtroom gasped. Karen's jaw literally dropped open. Her face flushed crimson. She stammered. But I'm on the Homeowners Association board. Can't. Not anymore. The judge cut in coldly. Effective immediately. You are barred from holding any Homeowners Association position due to misconduct. Dead. Silence. Walking out of that courthouse felt like breathing for the first time in months. Sunlight hit my face and I just laughed. A deep, relieved laugh that felt like freedom. My wife hugged me tight. You did it, she whispered. But the cherry on top. A week later, a moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. Word spread fast. Between the fines, the legal fees, and the humiliation, she couldn't afford to stay. And guess what? The very same neighbors she'd terrorized for years. They stood on their porches, arms crossed, watching her load box after box. Not a single one helped. Not a single goodbye. I stood on my lawn, sipping coffee, and for once I didn't hide my grin. She glanced over, eyes full of venom, but she couldn't say a word. Court orders. Silence was the sweetest revenge. And when the truck pulled away, leaving her house empty, I whispered to myself, for sale, finally for real. You ever have one of those days where the air just feels heavy, like the world's holding its breath, waiting for something ugly to happen? Yeah, that was me, standing in my driveway, coffee in hand, watching a pack of leather-vested bikers rumble toward my front gate. And I knew exactly who sent them. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, the woman who could turn a loose garbage can lid into a federal case. And now, apparently, she'd graduated from sending nasty emails to sending muscle. My wife, Jessica, had only been on her morning walk when they cut her off at the end of our cul-de-sac. I saw it from the porch. One of them actually revved his engine and leaned forward like he was trying to intimidate her. She froze for a split second, then kept walking, chin up, like the stubborn angel she is. Hey! I yelled, stepping forward. My voice cut through the sound of engines. One of the biker's big guy, beard down to his chest, turned his head toward me. I could practically hear the smirk under his sunglasses. But what they didn't know, what Karen didn't know, was that I'm not the kind of man you send threats to. I'm not a victim. I'm Delta Force, retired, and my patience has limits. They peeled away before I reached them, circling back out toward the main road. Jessica made it up the driveway, cheeks flushed, hands trembling. They said she swallowed hard. They said if I didn't stop talking to the board about her fraud, there'd be consequences. I felt my jaw tighten. Fraud. The word tasted sour. Because she wasn't wrong, Karen had been doctoring invoices for months, forging signatures, rerouting HOA funds to her personal reimbursement account. And I had proof. The problem? She also had friends in low places. Friends who apparently liked motorcycles and intimidation. I took a slow breath, forcing myself not to sprint down the road after them right that second. Go inside. Lock the door. But, Jessica, my tone left no room for debate. When she was safe inside, I sat in my truck, engine idling, watching the road. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I also wasn't about to let someone think they could terrorize my wife without consequence. The next day, things got worse. I found a letter taped to our Dorno envelope, just folded paper in shaky handwriting. Drop the lawsuit or next time we won't just talk. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that startled even me. Next time, huh? Oh, Karen, you really had no idea who you were messing with. That night, I started making calls. Old contacts. People from a past life most folks in this neighborhood couldn't even imagine. Men who'd operated in sand and shadow, who could dismantle a threat before breakfast and be home in time for dinner. The thing about intimidation, it only works if the other side is afraid. 3 days later, I caught them on camera, same bikers, loitering at the end of our street. They thought they were being subtle, leaning against their bikes, smoking, pretending not to look at our house. My security system caught every frame. I sent the footage to my attorney, along with copies of the forged HOA documents I'd been collecting for months. The lawsuit I'd filed against Karen for fraud and embezzlement had just gained a whole new angle. Harassment and conspiracy. Still, I wasn't done. See, intimidation's a two-way street. And I learned a long time ago that the fastest way to end a threat is to make it too costly for them to continue. The next time they showed up, I didn't confront them. I followed them. 2 miles down the highway, they pulled into a rundown bar with a neon skull over the door. I parked 2 blocks away, slipped inside through the back, and waited. My heart rate didn't spike, not after all the things I'd been through, but my mind was razor sharp. They sat in a corner booth, laughing, throwing back beers. I caught enough of their conversation to know they weren't just Karen's friends, they were being paid. Cash. And she was using HOA funds to do it. That was it. Game over. Within 48 hours, I had everything in place. My attorney filed a motion to expand the civil suit into a criminal complaint, and I handed over every shred of evidence to a federal investigator I'd served with overseas. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was interstate fraud and conspiracy to commit assault. And here's the thing about federal charges, they stick. The morning the agents moved in, I was drinking coffee on the porch, same as the day it started. Jessica sat beside me, still shaken but steadier now. We heard the engines before we saw them. For a moment I thought again, but this time it wasn't just motorcycles. It was black SUVs, unmarked but unmistakable. The bikers didn't stand a chance. 1 second they were rolling down our street, the next they were on the pavement, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Karen's shrill voice carried all the way from her porch as 2 agents walked her to a waiting vehicle. "You can't do this. I'm the president of the HOA. "Not anymore," one of the agents replied, voice flat. Jessica let out a slow, shaky laugh. "I can't believe it. It's actually over." But I knew it wasn't over, not for Karen. Not by a long shot. Federal time isn't like county jail. You don't just charm your way out of it. And as for me, I'd learned something important. Sometimes the best counterattack isn't the loudest one. It's the one they never see coming until the cuffs click shut. Turns out I was right, it wasn't over for Karen. 2 weeks after the arrests, I got a letter from her attorney. She was still trying to fight, claiming the bikers acted independently and that she had no knowledge of their harassment. Cute, except the bank records, text messages, and a little voice memo from one of the bikers himself told a different story. That biker Reed was smarter than the rest. Or maybe just more desperate. He took a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence and witness protection. And boy, did he sing. Every payment. Every order. Even the little detail about Karen forging a board member's signature to release HOA funds for security patrol. Forged. Fraud. Harassment. Embezzlement. It read like a federal prosecutor's wish list. Meanwhile, Jessica and I started sleeping through the night again. No more rumble of engines after dark. No more shadows at the end of the street. The neighborhood was quieter. 2 people were actually smiling at each other in the morning, as if a storm cloud had finally moved on. But Karen? She was a different story. Word got around that she tried one last stunt from county lockup before her transfer to federal prison. She had her cousin file a countersuit against me for emotional distress and character defamation. I almost laughed myself off the porch when I read it. We didn't even have to break a sweat on that one. The judge dismissed it in under 5 minutes, citing the ongoing federal case and the mountain of evidence against her. I swear, the sound of that gavel was better than any medal I'd ever earned. Her sentencing came 3 months later. I didn't attend, but I heard every detail from my attorney. The judge didn't mince words, calling her a manipulative, dangerous influence who had abused her position of authority for personal gain. 7 years. Federal time. No parole. When Jessica and I got the news, we sat out on the porch, watching the sun dip low over the rooftops. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "It's really over now." I took a long breath, the air sweeter than it had been in months. "Yeah," I said quietly, "and we didn't have to become them to win." That night, I filed one last motion closing the civil lawsuit. Not because I couldn't win more damages, but because sometimes the real victory is watching justice crush the people who thought they were untouchable. And to anyone listening to this, if you've got a Karen in your life who thinks they can bully, forge, and commit fraud without consequence, trust me, keep your head, keep your proof, and let the law do its work. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life justice like this, hit that subscribe button on my YouTube channel because the next lawsuit I tell you about is even crazier. They said it was just a misunderstanding. But I watched the clock tick while my father gasped for air on the porch, his lips turning blue, and the ambulance sat at the gate, trapped by 2 matching SUVs and 2 smug sisters with folded arms. One of them even smiled at me and said, "Maybe you shouldn't have built so close to the private entrance." You ever feel that slow burn in your chest, the one that starts behind your ribs and rises like fire behind your eyes? I swear, for a moment the world got quiet. No birds, no cars, just my heartbeat slamming in my ears and my dad's faint wheezing behind me. Oh my God, he's not going to make it if they don't move. I ran down the gravel drive, waving my arms like a madman at the ambulance stuck behind the Karen's blockade. "He's in distress," I shouted. "Move your cars." But Lisa and Trina, those were their names, just stood there like 2 blonde statues in tennis skirts. Agawahoyoch, entitled, unshakable. Lisa, the older one, sipped iced coffee through a metal straw and said without blinking, "This isn't a public road. He should have used the back gate like everyone else." What? My hands clenched into fists. There is no back gate. He's dying. Still nothing. The EMT inside the ambulance got out and jogged up, defibrillator in hand, panting from the heat. "Sir, we need clear access now. Can you get them to move?" I turned back to the Karen sisters. "You're blocking emergency services. That's a federal crime." But Trina only crossed her arms. "We have HOA rights. The board ruled no heavy vehicles through the east side. You should have filed a waiver." Filed a waiver? For a dying man? That's when my neighbor Kyle came out, thank God for him, holding his phone, face flushed. "I called the sheriff," he said, eyes darting. And, I blinked. "You did what?" He nodded. And I might have said you still have contacts in DC, just to get the ball rolling faster. I looked at him like he was crazy. But then the radio crackled in the ambulance, and Lisa finally dropped her smug grin. Wait, what did he say? But it was too late. 10 minutes later, 10 agonizing minutes of trying to fan my dad's face and keep him conscious, we heard the low hum of engines. Then the gravel trembled. Boom, boom. Big tires on blacktop. A black SUV with flashing blue lights pulled up beside the ambulance, followed by 2 armored vehicles. SWAT. Full gear. Tactical vests. Helmets. Rifles across their chests. The Karen sisters? Their faces drained of color like a printer running out of ink. Wait, Lisa stammered. We didn't know. This isn't that serious. You're obstructing an emergency response. One of the officers snapped. Move your vehicles. Now. But this is private, Trina started. But the officer raised a hand. Mom. If you don't comply in the next 30 seconds, this becomes a criminal offense under state and federal law. You could have heard a pin drop. Then keys fumbled. The SUVs roared to life. I swear, Trina almost drove into Lisa's bumper trying to move fast enough. As soon as the path was cleared, the EMTs shot through like lightning. They reached my dad, got the oxygen mask on him, and within 2 minutes he was stable enough for transport. I followed in Kyle's truck, still shaking, still trying to understand what had just happened. But the best part? That came 2 hours later. I was sitting in the hospital hallway, phone in hand, numb but grateful. Dad was going to make it. He had a severe allergic reaction, probably a bee sting, and if it had been delayed 5 more minutes, he might have coded. That's when my phone lit up with a call from a local news reporter. Mr. Daniels? I heard about the incident from a sheriff's deputy. Would you mind giving a statement? There's dashcam footage. SWAT confirmed this may be used in court. But it wasn't until the next day that the full karma really hit. A video went viral recorded from a neighbor's Ring cam, showing the moment the Karens were forced to move. Their trembling hands, Lisa dropping her sunglasses, Trina crying. The caption, HOA Karens block EMT, then SWAT shows up. Boom. 1 million views in 2 days. The HOA tried to issue a formal apology on behalf of the sisters, but it was too late. County officials opened an investigation. Turns out, that stretch of road had actually been marked as an emergency access lane 10 years ago, but Lisa's husband had it paved over and never registered the change. Meaning, their whole private road excuse was built on a lie. And the cherry on top, Lisa worked in real estate. Her license was suspended within a week for public obstruction and endangerment. Trina? She was the VP of the HOA, not anymore. A surprise vote was held 2 nights after the incident. Nearly the whole neighborhood showed UPAN. She was unanimously removed. But get this, she tried to sue me. Yup, claimed emotional distress, public defamation, and even accused me of weaponizing the legal system. I just stared at the papers, laughed, and sent them to my lawyer. Want to guess how that went? Let's just say, SWAT officers make very convincing witnesses in court. You want the final twist? Trina's husband, quiet guy, never said much, filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Cited irreconcilable public humiliation. Boom. Twist drop. Karma delivered. And every now and then, I walk by that east road where it all happened. It's still got the faint tire marks from those armored trucks. The HOA tried to scrub them clean. But some things, they leave a permanent mark. After the lawsuits were tossed out, public nuisance, obstruction, and one hilariously desperate claim that I had intimidated them by involving law enforcement, Trina and Lisa disappeared from the HOA spotlight. Lisa tried to host a community brunch a month later, but only 2 people showed up. One elderly neighbor who thought it was a garage sale, and a teenager who wanted to film her for TikTok. Trina, meanwhile, went radio silent until someone spotted her working the front desk at a nearby fitness center. A far cry from her HOA throne. The community changed after that. People became less afraid to speak up. One guy finally planted tomatoes in his front yard despite Trina's years of threatening aesthetic violations. A family down the block built a wheelchair ramp for their son. something Trina had previously blocked for curb appeal. And me? I got a handwritten note from a woman 2 streets over that simply said, "Thank you for standing your ground. My dad passed last year because help came late. You did what I couldn't." I kept that letter. My dad's recovering well now. Still grumbles about the food at the rehab center, but he's back to breathing steady, and he'll be home by next month. He made me promise we'd install a big red emergency call button at the front gate, something visible, something undeniable. I agreed, and the HOA can't say a word about it now. Not after county officials slapped them with mandatory access compliance laws and fined them for the entire incident. Funny how fast Karen power evaporates when faced with a lawsuit and a SWAT team. You want the best part, though? Lisa's viral moment made it onto a national talk show under the segment Entitlement Gone Wrong. Her frozen expression as the officer told her to move is now a meme. Caption: "When the lawsuit backfires and the SWAT says hi, every time I see it online, I can't help but smirk." So if you're dealing with an HOA nightmare or a neighbor who thinks they're the law, remember this. Karma moves quiet, but it hits hard. And sometimes it wears tactical boots. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want more wild real-life stories of karma, lawsuits, and HOA justice, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this suburban battlefield is just getting started. "You can't be serious?" I muttered, blinking in disbelief at the sound of jackhammers next door. It was 7:45 in the morning, on a Sunday, and there it was, Karen's backyard being torn apart, again. Except this time, it wasn't just for her usual cosmetic upgrades or wine bar cabana dreams. No, Karen, the self-declared queen of our HOA, had apparently rented out her private Pulto, a rehab facility. That's right, a residential rehab center was now operating out of her poolside patio, smack dab in the middle of a quiet cul-de-sac. And I only found out because one of the patients wandered into my backyard in nothing but boxers and a hospital bracelet, asking for a cigarette. I stood there, frozen, holding a rake in my gloved hands like a weapon. "You're from where?" He blinked slowly. "The pool place? Over there." He pointed, eyes red-rimmed. "Karen said it's fine. Karen said it's fine." What followed that moment was something between a horror movie and an insurance commercial gone terribly wrong. First came the steady trickle of staff members parking on everyone else's driveway because Karen's own couldn't handle the load. Then came the shrieking arguments at all hours. Some guy broke down crying right outside my son's bedroom window. And Karen? She acted like nothing was wrong, like this was all a normal, responsible community service. "She's making money off this," I hissed to my wife, staring through the blinds like I was in some suburban spy movie. "Cash. Under the table. No permits. No licenses. And now there's literally a medical-grade pool lift bolted into her deck. It's insane," my wife muttered, shaking her head. "Isn't that against every HOA rule she wrote?" Oh, the irony. Karen, the same woman who fined me for planting dwarf sunflowers instead of approved perennials, was now running an unlicensed rehab pool 2 doors down. No permits. No inspections. No warning. So I called the HOA board. Crickets. I emailed them again, attaching pictures. One response: Karen mentioned she is helping with a community wellness initiative. A wellness initiative? That's what we're calling this now? The next morning, a moving truck pulled up and unloaded hospital gurneys into her garage. That's when I lost it. I marched over there, still in my yard boots, and knocked on her door like I meant it. She opened it with that fake, syrupy smile. "Oh, hi. You must be here to volunteer." "Karen," I snapped, "what are you doing? This isn't legal. You're renting out your house to a medical business." Her smile never faltered. "It's not a business. It's therapy. Pool therapy. Very gentle. Very safe. We're helping people recover from addiction and trauma in a natural environment. In the suburbs. Without permits." She shrugged. "People heal better in peace." I took a breath. Then another. "There are needles in your trash can. One of your clients was crying on my lawn at midnight. You've turned this neighborhood into a halfway house and you think it's fine." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Well, If you don't support recovery, that's your issue. Oh, don't, I growled. Don't you dare twist this. But I wasn't stupid. Arguing wouldn't stop her. Karen had that toxic confidence of someone who thought the rules were meant for other people. But I had something she didn't expect. My brother-in-law, Tony, was a city inspector. I didn't even have to convince him. I showed him the pictures, sent him an audio clip of someone yelling about withdrawals at 3 a.m., and the next morning Tony got very curious. He wasn't just a city inspector, he was friends with the fire marshal. By Friday afternoon, there were 4 unmarked government vehicles parked outside Karen's house. The street was dead silent except for the sound of clipboard pages flipping and the fire marshal's sharp voice. "Where are your ADA-compliant egress routes?" Karen sputtered. "What? You installed electrical medical equipment next to water without GFCI protection?" The inspector barked. "And who the hell wired this pump system? It's not even bonded." I watched from my porch with a mug of coffee, heart racing like it was the 4th of July. The fire marshal, this guy was no joke. He walked around pointing out code violations like he was giving a tour of a disaster zone. "No fire exits, no signage, open flame candles near oxygen tanks. What is this place?" he asked. Karen's voice got shrill. "It's therapy. It's a private initiative. You don't have jurisdiction." "Wrong," he snapped, spinning around. "Once you rent out your property for medical services, you fall under state regulation. You're done." And just like that, they started shutting everything down. They taped off the pool. They unplugged the lift. Someone started hauling boxes of meds out of the garage and into evidence bags. Karen was standing there, in her leopard print robe, sputtering like a sprinkler system gone rogue. "You can't do this. I help people. I'm the HOA president." The fire marshal looked at her flatly. "Ma'am, you're also liable for every injury on this site. You violated fire code, building code, and health ordinances. You're lucky we're not pressing charges today." I swear I saw her knees buckle. And the sweet, poetic twist, an ambulance pulled up. Not because anyone was hurt, but because one of the residents needed to be relocated immediately. That's when we all learned the truth. Karen wasn't just hosting therapy. She'd signed an under-the-table lease agreement with a shady rehab startup that didn't have a license in the state. They were paying her $8,000 a week. In cash. The whole thing? Illegal. But here's where it gets even juicier. Turns out, Karen had threatened to fine other board members into silence. One of them finally snapped and turned over email receipts. Karen, using HOA funds to renovate her backyard into a recovery sanctuary. And suddenly, the HOA wasn't so silent anymore. The neighborhood was buzzing now, buzzing like a swarm of angry bees that had finally found their queen. Word spread fast. Karen's little wellness pool was shut down, her illegal side hustle exposed, and the HOA was in chaos. But Karen, she refused to back down. I caught her one afternoon sitting on her front steps, scrolling furiously on her phone, face tight like she was calculating her next move. I couldn't help but wonder, what now? Her phone rang, and she answered sharply, "Yes, I know what the bylaws say, but this is community health." "Karen," I said, stepping closer, "you're risking a lawsuit from every single neighbor here. You've broken rules, endangered people, and wasted HOA funds." She glanced at me with that cold, hard stare that had caused so much trouble before. "You think I care? I'm untouchable." But that was the moment the tide turned. Karen's allies within the HOA began calling meetings closed-door sessions filled with whispered accusations and mounting evidence. The emails, the photos, the fire marshal's report, they were all damning. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove her as president. Karen screamed like a cornered animal, accusing everyone of betrayal, but it was too late. Her empire was crumbling. The neighbors who once trembled at her orders now openly mocked her. And then came the final blow. The rehab startup filed a lawsuit against Karen for breach of contract and negligence. The company claimed she had put their clients at risk by ignoring safety regulations and falsifying permits. In court documents, Karen was painted not as a community savior but as a reckless opportunist who put money before people. The neighborhood gathered outside the courthouse the day Karen faced the judge. Cameras flashed, whispers buzzed, and the once powerful HOA queen looked smaller than ever, frustrated, defeated, and finally accountable. It was a long, exhausting battle, but the story ended with a message louder than any HOA newsletter. No one is above the law, no matter how many rules they wrote or how many fines they handed out. As I walked back home, hearing the last echoes of the gavel, I couldn't help but sigh deeply. Justice had been served not just for us, but for everyone Karen ever tried to control. And if you want to see more stories like this, true tales of HOA drama, wild Karen revenge, and unexpected karma, hit that subscribe button and join the community. Because trust me, the lawsuits and the chaos, they're only getting started.